The Celestial Academy hung in space, like a massive crystal snowflake, its transparent spires refracting starlight across the void. Kira Chen stood at the viewport of her approaching shuttle, her weathered violin case clutched tightly against her chest. The instrument inside was worth more than most small starships, not for its materials or craftsmanship, but for what it could do in the right hands. "Approaching final docking sequence," announced the shuttle's eye. "Welcome to Nexus Prime, Professor Chen." Kira allowed herself a small smile. Professor. The title still felt foreign, especially here at the galaxy's most prestigious music academy. She watched as the massive docking bay doors parted, revealing a hangar filled with sleek private vessels belonging to the galaxy's elite. Her humble transport looked decidedly out of place. As she stepped onto the academy's polished floors, the air hummed with an almost imperceptible resonance. The resonance, the species that had founded the academy, naturally produced complex harmonics that humans could barely perceive. Their civilization was built on music, but not the kind humans traditionally understood. They manipulated quantum frequencies, using them for everything from communication to space travel. Professor Chen. A tall, crystalline figure glided toward her. Archenvress, the academy's director, moved with liquid grace, his translucent body catching and refracting light with each movement. "We are pleased you accepted our invitation." The pause before "pleased" told Kira everything she needed to know about the Archon's true feelings. Hiring a human instructor had been controversial, to say the least, but her methods had produced results that even the resonance couldn't ignore. "The honor is mine, Archon," Kira replied, bowing slightly. "I look forward to sharing Earth's musical traditions with your students." "Yes, well." Vressa's crystalline features shifted in what might have been a frown. "Do remember that our students are here to master quantum harmonics, not to learn primitive entertainment." Kira bit back a sharp reply. She'd expected resistance, but the dismissal still stung. Music is music, Archon. The principles remain constant across species and space. A group of students floated past, their crystalline bodies humming in perfect harmony. Young resonants, barely into their first phase of growth. They looked at Kira with undisguised curiosity. One of them, smaller than the others, produced a discordant note of excitement before being quickly hushed by their companions. "Your quarters have been prepared," Vress continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Classes begin tomorrow. Do try to avoid any disruptions." As the Archon glided away, Kira allowed her fingers to brush against her violin case. Inside, the strings vibrated ever so slightly in response to the Academy's ambient frequencies. She'd modified the instrument herself, incorporating quantum resonators that allowed it to bridge the gap between human music and resonant harmonics. They thought she was here to teach primitive songs. They had no idea she was about to revolutionize their understanding of music itself. Her quarters were sparse but functional, with one wall open to the star-filled void. Kira unpacked quickly, setting up her small quantum interface and carefully placing her violin on its stand. As she did so, a soft chime indicated an incoming message. "Professor Chen." The face that appeared in the hologram was young, crystalline, and slightly out of phase. A student, broadcasting secretly. "I'm Tilura. I've studied your work with quantum-modified instruments. What you did with the Sydney Orchestra. It was beautiful." Kira leaned forward, intrigued. "Thank you, Tilura. Though I'm surprised you've heard of that performance. It wasn't exactly celebrated in resonance circles." "That's why it was important," Tilura replied, her form flickering with excitement. "You proved the humans could understand and manipulate quantum harmonics. That we're not so different." A warning chime sounded in the background of Tilura's transmission. "I have to go," she said quickly. "But I wanted you to know, not everyone here shares the Archon's views. Some of us are eager to learn what you have to teach." The transmission cut off, leaving Kira alone with her thoughts. She turned to her violin, lifting it gently from its stand. The strings hummed under her fingers, resonating with the station's ambient frequencies. She began to play, a simple earth melody that she'd modified to incorporate quantum harmonics. As the music filled her quarters, she felt the subtle shift in the station's background resonance. Somewhere in the vast academy, other frequencies adjusted to match her song. The young resonants were listening, their natural harmonics unconsciously aligning with her music. Kira smiled. Tomorrow, she would begin teaching them how to bridge the gap between their two forms of music. But tonight, she was content to play, letting her modified violin sing to the stars. She had no way of knowing that her arrival at the Celestial Academy would trigger a chain of events that would change both human and resonant society forever, or that the simple act of teaching music would uncover secrets that some would kill to protect. For now, she played, her music carrying through quantum fields to touch minds that had never considered that their sophisticated harmonics could be enhanced by what they considered primitive melodies. And somewhere in the academy, a young resonant named Lara listened, her crystalline form vibrating in perfect harmony with the strange, beautiful music of Earth. 2 weeks into her tenure at the Celestial Academy, Kira noticed the first signs that something was wrong. During her morning class, young resonant Livor collapsed mid-harmony, his crystalline form vibrating at a frequency that made Kira's teeth ache. The other students' harmonics faltered in distress, creating a cacophony that set her modified instruments screaming in their cases. "Class dismissed," she announced, rushing to Livor's side. The student's usual pristine surface was clouded, internal fractures spreading like spider webs through his crystalline body. Before she could examine him further, 2 faculty members materialized, their forms humming with authority. "We will handle this," one stated, their tone brooking no argument. They lifted Livor's unconscious form between them and vanished through a quantum shift, leaving only a lingering resonance behind. Kira stood alone in her classroom, her heart pounding. What she'd seen in those brief moments, the fracture patterns, the discordant frequencies, it wasn't natural. She'd studied resonant physiology extensively before taking this position. Their bodies didn't break like that. Later that evening, as she recorded her observations, her quantum interface chimed. Solera's face appeared, more distorted than usual. "Professor, did you see what happened to Livor?" "I did." Kira leaned closer to the screen. "Lara, those fracture patterns. Meet me in the old harmonic chamber, level sub-7. Please, there's something you need to know." The transmission cut off abruptly. The old harmonic chamber was a relic from the Academy's early days, its walls lined with primitive quantum resonators that modern resonants considered embarrassingly obsolete. Kira found Lara waiting inside, her form flickering anxiously. "Livor isn't the first," Lara said without preamble. "There have been others. Students who showed particular talent with certain frequencies. They push us, Professor. Push us to extend our range, to resonate at frequencies that—" She shuddered, her form briefly destabilizing. "Who pushes you?" Kira asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. "The Advanced Harmonics Program. They select the most promising students. Claim it's an honor, but those who return, they're different. Their harmonics are wrong." Lara's voice dropped to a whisper. "Some don't return at all." Kira's mind raced. She'd noticed how some students seemed to disappear from her roster without explanation. The Academy attributed it to transfers, family obligations, but if what Lara was saying was true, a distant alarm sounded, and Lara's form pulsed with fear. "They're scanning for unauthorized harmonics. I have to go." "But Professor, watch the students during the resonance exercises. Watch how the faculty observes them. You'll see." After Lara left, Kira remained in the chamber, her fingers absently tracing the old resonators. Her violin case sat heavy against her back, and she found herself pulling out the instrument, needing its familiar comfort. She began to play, but not Earth music this time. Instead, she reproduced the frequency she'd observed during Livor's collapse. The modified strings vibrated unnaturally, and the ancient resonators in the walls began to hum in response. As the frequencies aligned, her quantum interface sparked to life unexpectedly, displaying readings she'd never seen before. The numbers made no sense at first, until she recognized a pattern. These weren't just harmonics, they were coordinates, quantum coordinates leading to somewhere within the academy that didn't appear on any official maps. The next day, Kira watched her class with new eyes. She saw how certain faculty members lingered during resonance exercises, their forms shifting with interest when a student demonstrated exceptional range. She noticed the subtle tests woven into the curriculum, pushing students to attempt more complex harmonics than necessary for their level. During her free period, she accessed the Academy's public records, tracking student movements over the past 5 years. The pattern was subtle but undeniable. Every semester, a small percentage of the most talented students would be selected for advanced studies. Their public profiles would show regular activity for a few weeks, then become increasingly sporadic before either disappearing entirely or showing markedly different frequency patterns. The Academy wasn't just teaching these children, it was experimenting on them. But why? What could be worth the risk of damaging young resonants, of potentially destroying their natural harmonics? The answer came during her evening practice session. She was reviewing recordings of Lover's collapse when she noticed something in the frequency analysis. In the moment before he fell, his harmonics had aligned perfectly with a theoretical frequency that shouldn't have been possible for resonance to achieve. A frequency that could, in theory, allow for instantaneous quantum transportation across vast distances. They were trying to create living quantum drives. The realization made her feel ill. The resonants had always been limited in how far they could quantum shift, restricted by their natural harmonic ranges. But if they could expand those ranges, force their bodies to resonate at these impossible frequencies. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. Professor Chen. Arkshenvressa's voice filled her quarters. The Advanced Harmonics program has reviewed your students' progress. We would like to discuss some promising candidates. Please attend a faculty meeting tomorrow morning. Kira's blood ran cold. They weren't just inviting her to a meeting. They were testing her. Had they noticed her investigations, her unusual interest in Lover's collapse? Of course, Arkin, she replied, keeping her voice steady. I look forward to it. After the communication ended, Kira sat in silence, her violin humming softly in its case, resonating with her racing thoughts. She had a choice to make. She could play along, pretend ignorance, maybe even gather more evidence, or she could act now, try to protect her students before more of them disappeared into whatever secret program the Academy was running. But as she considered her options, a new frequency caught her attention, a distress signal buried deep in the Academy's ambient harmonics. Someone was calling for help, their quantum signature distorted almost beyond recognition. But Kira recognized it anyway. It was Lover. Kira's fingers danced across her quantum interface, trying to isolate Lover's distress signal without alerting the Academy's monitoring systems. Tulera hovered nearby, her crystalline form dimmed to near invisibility to avoid detection. The signal's coming from sublevel 12, Kira whispered, watching the frequency patterns shift across her screen. But that's impossible. According to the Academy schematics, sublevel 12 doesn't exist. It exists. Tulera's voice was barely a harmonic whisper. We've all felt it. A void in the resonance field, like a dead zone in the Academy song. But no one who's tried to investigate has ever returned. Kira checked her modified violin, ensuring its quantum resonators were properly calibrated. After discovering the experiments, she'd made some adjustments to the instrument. Now it could do more than just bridge human and resonant music. It could potentially disrupt or mask quantum frequencies altogether. The faculty meeting is in 6 hours, Kira said. If we're going to find Ulvor, it has to be now. Tulera's form pulsed with anxiety. Professor, if they catch us, they won't. Kira lifted her violin. Because we're going to give them exactly what they expect to hear. Using techniques she developed during her years of quantum musical research, Kira began to play. The melody was simple, but the quantum harmonics she wove through it were incredibly complex. She was creating a resonance loop, a repeating pattern that would make it appear she was in her quarters, practicing for tomorrow's classes. "Now," she said, securing her violin, "show me how to reach sublevel 12. Tilara led her through maintenance corridors that thrummed with the Academy's power systems. The further down they went, the more the ambient resonance changed. The usual crystalline harmony of the Academy became discordant, almost painful. They reached a section of wall that looked identical to any other, but Tilara's form trembled as she approached it. "Here, the void is strongest here." Kira pressed her hand against the wall, feeling the unnatural absence of resonance. She pulled out her violin and drew the bow across the strings, producing a frequency that matched the wall's quantum signature. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the wall simply ceased to exist, revealing the dark corridor beyond. "How did you?" Tilara began. "Everything has a resonant frequency," Kira explained. "Even quantum barriers. Sometimes the key to breaking something is to match its song perfectly." They moved through darkened corridors lined with equipment Kira had never seen before. The walls were studded with crystals that absorbed light rather than reflecting it, and the air itself seemed to resist their movement. Then they heard it, a harmonic cry of pain that made Tilara's form shudder. Livor's voice, but distorted wrong. They followed the sound to a vast chamber filled with suspended crystalline pods. Inside each pod was a student, their forms fractured and shifting as strange devices pulsed with dark energy. "They're trying to force our quantum ranges to expand," Tilara whispered in horror, "using harmonic manipulation to restructure our very essence." Kira moved to the nearest pod, where Livor floated in suspended animation. His once beautiful crystalline form was riddled with fractures, dark energy coursing through the breaks like black lightning. The monitoring equipment showed his quantum frequency range had been expanded by 300%. Far beyond what any resonance should be capable of achieving. "We have to shut this down," Kira said, reaching for her interface. But before she could act, a new harmony filled the chamber, cold, calculating, and familiar. Professor Chen. Archonvres materialized from the shadows, his form larger and darker than Kira had ever seen it. "I must admit, your arrival at the Academy has proved more disruptive than anticipated." More faculty members appeared, surrounding them. Among them was Tilara's own mentor, Professor Shrin, whose form rippled with barely contained violence. "You don't understand what you've discovered here," Vres continued. "These students are not victims. They are pioneers. Their sacrifice will revolutionize quantum travel, free our people from the limitations that have bound us for millennia." Sacrifice. Kira's voice shook with rage. "They're children. You're torturing children. We are evolving them," Shrin cut in. "Those who survive will be gods among resonance, capable of quantum shifting across galaxies. They will be the foundation of a new era. Those who survive." Tilara's form flared with anger. "How many have you already killed?" Vres moved closer, his massive form looming over them. "Enough questions. Professor Chen, you have a choice. Join us as a researcher. Your understanding of quantum harmonics could be invaluable to our work. Or join our subjects as an experimental participant. Humans have never been tested in our program. The results could be fascinating." Kira's hand tightened on her violin bow. In the pods around them, students continued to writhe in harmonic agony. Livor's distress signal had become a barely audible whimper. "Actually," she said, lifting her violin, "I have a third option." The first note she played shattered every monitoring crystal in the chamber. The second created a resonance cascade that made the faculty members stagger, their forms destabilizing. The third revealed a hidden truth about the Academy that would change everything. The quantum barrier around sublevel 12 wasn't just containing the experiments. It was containing something else entirely. Something ancient and powerful that the Academy had built itself around. Something that responded to Kira's music with a harmony that shook the very foundations of space itself. And as that harmony grew, Kira realized that the true secret of the Celestial Academy was far darker than even she had imagined. The ancient being's harmony resonated through the chamber, a sound so profound it made reality itself shiver. Archanvress and his faculty backed away, their crystalline forms fluctuating in fear. In the experimental pods, the imprisoned students began to hum in response, their fractured bodies glowing with newfound strength. "What have you done?" Vress demanded, but his usual authority had cracked, revealing the desperation beneath. Kira kept playing, her modified violin connecting with both the students' harmonies and the ancient entity's song. "You built your academy on top of a quantum consciousness," she said between notes, "a being of pure resonance, and you've been using its power to fuel your experiments." Thalara's form pulsed with sudden understanding. The void in the resonance field, it wasn't absence, it was containment. You were suppressing its frequencies. For the greater good, Sren insisted. Its power could revolutionize quantum travel, but only if properly controlled and channeled through tortured children. Kira's music turned sharp, accusatory. The ancient being's harmony swelled in response, and cracks began appearing in the chamber's quantum-dampening crystals. But Vress wasn't finished. He raised his hands, and suddenly the chamber was filled with security drones, their crystalline bodies humming with weaponized frequencies. "This is bigger than a few students' discomfort, Professor Chen. The future of our entire civilization is built on suffering," Thalara cut in. She floated to Kira's side, her own harmonics aligning with the violin's music. "But it doesn't have to be." One by one, the students in the pods began to join the harmony. Even in their damaged state, they could feel the truth in the music. Luvor's pod sparked and cracked as his frequencies synchronized with the growing symphony. Kira knew they had only moments before Vress called for reinforcements, but she also knew that the Academy's centennial performance was scheduled for tomorrow, an event where every influential family in the Quantum Alliance would be present. "Thalara," she said, still playing, "can you reach the Academy's broadcast system from here?" The young resonance form brightened with realization. "The quantum communication arrays? Yes, but they're heavily protected." "Not anymore." Kira shifted her melody, and the ancient being responded with a pulse of energy that made every crystal in the facility resonate at its natural frequency. Security systems shattered, quantum barriers dissolved, and suddenly the Academy's entire communication network was laid bare. "Everyone will know," Vress said, his voice tight with rage. "You'll destroy centuries of progress, of tradition." "We'll expose centuries of abuse," Kira corrected. She nodded to Thalara, who began accessing the communication systems. "But first, we're going to give these students back their voice." The next 20 minutes were chaos, as Thalara worked to broadcast their evidence across the quantum networks. Kira and the ancient being's combined harmonics kept the faculty at bay. The imprisoned students, their pods now disabled, were helping each other to safety, their broken bodies supported by their combined resonance. But it was what they found in the facility's deepest records that changed everything. The experiments weren't just about expanding quantum travel capabilities. The Academy had discovered that young resonants, when pushed to their limits, could access dimensional frequencies far beyond normal space-time. They weren't building living quantum drives. They were trying to create weapons, beings capable of tearing holes in reality itself. "The centennial performance," Thalara said, her form flickering with horror as she processed the files. They were planning to use it as a demonstration. All those students performing together, their enhanced frequencies synchronized, would have opened a dimensional rift large enough to threaten entire star systems. Kira finished. "A display of power to ensure the Academy's dominance." The ancient being's harmony changed, becoming something both mournful and resolute. Through their connected frequencies, Kira understood. It had been imprisoned here precisely because it had tried to prevent such weapons from being created in the past. Security reinforcements were breaking through what remained of the sublevels barriers. They had minutes at most. But Kira had one final card to play. Tilara, how many students can still resonate? Maybe 30, including those we just freed. But they're weak damage. But not broken, Kira insisted. She looked at the gathered students, their crystalline forms scared but determined. Tomorrow's performance was meant to be a weapon. Instead, it's going to be a revelation. She raised her violin and began teaching them a new harmony, one that combined human music, resonant frequencies, and the ancient being's cosmic song. A harmony that couldn't destroy, only create, only heal. As the security forces burst in, led by a fury-racked Vress, the students' combined resonance reached out across the Academy's quantum network. In every crystal, every communication array, every quantum-enabled device, their song began to play. It was the truth, expressed in pure harmony. And it was only the beginning. Because tomorrow, at the Centennial Performance, with the galaxy's most powerful leaders in attendance, they would play a symphony that would change everything. A symphony of rebellion, of healing, of hope. But first, they had to survive the night. The Grand Hall of the Celestial Academy glittered with the assembled elite of the Quantum Alliance. Crystalline nobles shifted and sparkled in their formal resonance patterns, while dignitaries from 100 worlds watched the stage with anticipation. None of them knew they were about to witness not just a performance, but a revolution. Backstage, Kira moved among her students, checking their frequencies, steadying their harmonics. The night had been long and dangerous. Vress had thrown everything he had at them: security forces, quantum dampeners, even targeted harmonic disruptions. But the ancient being's power, combined with their own determination, had kept them safe. "Ready?" she asked Tilara, who was helping Liver maintain his increasingly unstable form. The young resonance surface rippled with determination. The other students are in position. Every quantum receiver in the Academy is prepared to broadcast. We'll only have one chance at this. Then we'll make it count. Kira lifted her violin, its modified strings humming with possibility. The ancient being's consciousness brushed against her mind, its frequencies aligning with her intentions. Vress stood at the center of the stage, his massive form radiating false benevolence as he addressed the crowd. "Welcome to the Celestial Academy's Centennial Performance. Today, our most gifted students will demonstrate the future of quantum harmonics." Kira took her place in the wings, watching as the first group of students floated onto the stage. These were the ones Vress had selected, the ones whose frequencies had been forcibly expanded. They began to play the piece he had chosen, a complex quantum harmony designed to gradually tear open the fabric of space-time. But something was different. The students' frequencies weren't building toward destruction. Instead, they were weaving a subtle counter-harmony, one that Kira had taught them in the precious hours before dawn. A harmony of truth. Vress noticed too late. By the time he realized what was happening, Tilara had led the rescued students onto the stage, their damaged forms glowing with combined purpose. And then Kira stepped forward, violin raised. The first note she played shattered every quantum dampener in the hall. The second connected the ancient being's consciousness to the Academy's broadcast network. And the third began their true performance, a symphony that combined all they had learned, all they had suffered, all they hoped to create. Through the music, the audience saw everything. The experiments, the torture, the hidden facility. They felt the students' pain, their fear, their resilience. The quantum consciousness shared its own story, how it had been imprisoned, how its power had been perverted from creation to destruction. Vress tried to stop them, his form expanding with rage. "Security. End this performance immediately." But the security forces didn't move. They couldn't. The music had reached them too, showing them the truth about the institution they had served. Throughout the Academy, crystals resonated with revelation. In the dormitories, in the classrooms, in the hidden laboratories, everyone heard the symphony of change. The students' harmonies grew stronger, their frequencies healing each other as they played. Liver's fractured form began to stabilize. Tolera's resonance, once dampened by fear, rang out clear and strong. They were no longer victims or experiments. They were musicians, creators, revolutionaries. Then something extraordinary happened. The ancient being, freed from its centuries of imprisonment, added its own voice to the symphony. Its consciousness expanded through the Academy's quantum network, touching minds across the galaxy. Everyone connected to the Quantum Alliance felt its song, a song of potential, of harmony between species, of power used to create rather than destroy. In the audience, crystalline nobles began to vibrate in sympathy. Dignitaries from 100 worlds witnessed the birth of a new kind of music, one that could bridge not just the gap between human and resonant art, but between all forms of consciousness. Vress made one final attempt to regain control. He tried to activate the Academy's quantum core, to force the students' frequencies into the weapon configuration he had planned. But the ancient being was ready. It caught his command and transformed it, turning destructive energy into pure creative force. The Academy itself began to change. The rigid crystalline architecture softened, becoming organic, alive with possibility. The barriers between sections dissolved. The hidden facilities were exposed to light and air. Everything Vress had built to contain and control was transformed into spaces for learning, for growth, for true collaboration. As the symphony reached its crescendo, Kira saw tears on the faces of the audience, actual tears from beings who had never known physical weeping. The students' music had touched something fundamental, something that transcended species and culture and ideology. The performance ended not with a dramatic finale, but with a gentle harmony that rippled outward like waves on an infinite ocean. In its wake, the Celestial Academy would never be the same. The Quantum Alliance would never be the same. The very nature of what was possible had been expanded not through force or torture, but through art and truth and courage. Vress and his followers were taken into custody, their crimes documented in frequencies that couldn't be denied. The ancient being chose to stay, no longer a prisoner but a teacher, helping students understand the true potential of quantum harmonics. And the Academy began its transformation into something new, a place where humans and resonance and all species could learn from each other, where music wasn't a weapon but a bridge between worlds. Later, as Kira packed her violin away, Tolera approached her. The young resonance form was already showing signs of natural healing, her frequencies finding their true range without force or coercion. "What happens now, Professor?" Kira smiled, feeling the lingering harmonies of their performance still resonating through the Academy. Now we really start teaching music." Around them, in every crystal and quantum field, new songs were already beginning to play.